In 1836, a small band of volunteer forces took control and, in a desperate bid, held on to this location in San Antonio to try and buy the Texan forces more time and to stick it to the larger Mexican force. Today we are discussing the Battle of the Alamo, which lasted from February 23rd, 1836 to March 6th, 1836. Today. The Battle of the Alamo during Texas's War of Independence from Mexico lasted for 13 days. In December of 1835, a group of Texan volunteer soldiers had occupied what was known as the Alamo, which was a former Franciscan mission located near the present-day city of San Antonio. On February 23rd, a Mexican force numbering the thousands and led by General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna began a siege of this fort. Though vastly outnumbered, the Alamo's 200 defenders commanded by James Bowie and William B. Travis, and including the famed frontiersman Davy Crockett, held out for 13 days before the Mexican forces finally overpowered them. For Texans, the Battle of the Alamo became an enduring symbol of their resistance to oppression and the idea of the American prospect during this time, and their struggle for independence, which was won a year later. The battle cry of "Remember the Alamo" later became popular during the rest of the War of Independence, as well as the Mexican-American War of 1846 to 1848. So let's discuss the early history of the Alamo. Originally, Spanish settlers built the mission San Antonio de Valero, named for Saint Anthony of Padua, on the banks of the San Antonio River, around 1718. They also established the nearby military garrison of San Antonio de Bexar, which soon became the center of a settlement known as San Fernando de Bexar, which was later renamed San Antonio, which is still one of the largest cities in Texas. The mission, San Antonio de Valero, housed missionaries and their Native American converts for some 70 years until 1793, when Spanish authorities secularized the 5 missions located in San Antonio and distributed their lands among the local residents. So beginning in the early 1800s, Spanish military troops were stationed in the abandoned chapel on the former mission. Because it stood in a grove of cottonwood trees, the soldiers called their new fort El Alamo, after the Spanish word for cottonwood, and in honor of Alamo de Parras, their hometown in Mexico. Military troops, first Spanish, then rebel, and then later Mexican, occupied the Alamo. And after Mexico's War for Independence from Spain in the early 1820s, in the summer of 1821, Stephen F. Austin arrived in San Antonio along with some 300, as well as his father, as that was their goal to settle American settlers in this location of Mexico. The migration of U.S. citizens to Texas increased over the next decades, sparking a revolutionary movement as these American ideas did not sit well in the Mexican government. And a revolutionary movement got great traction with the Texians and the American immigrants, and it would erupt into armed conflict in the mid-1830s. So the Battle of the Alamo. In December of 1835, in the very early stages of Texas's War for Independence from Mexico, a group of Texian volunteers led by George Collinsworth and Benjamin Millam overwhelmed the Mexican garrison at the Alamo and captured the fort, seizing control of San Antonio as well. By mid-February 1836, Colonel James Bowie and Lieutenant Colonel William B. Travis had taken command of Texan forces in San Antonio. Though Sam Houston, the newly appointed commander-in-chief of the Texan forces, argued that San Antonio should be abandoned due to insufficient numbers, troops, and supplies. However, the Alamo's defenders, especially Bowie and Travis, dug in nonetheless. They believed that they could hold this spot, especially since it would be a crucial spot for their rival leader, Antonio de Santa Anna. So they held on to this, against orders I should point out, and decided that they would dig in and try to hold on to the location. These defenders, who despite later reinforcements never numbered more than 200, included Davy Crockett, the famous frontiersman and former congressman from Tennessee, who had arrived in earlier February with Tennessee and Kentuckian volunteers. So on February 23rd, a Mexican force comprising somewhere between 1,800 and 6,000 men, according to the various estimates and records, commanded by General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, began a siege of the fort of the Alamo. The Texans held out for 13 days, with constant bombardment from the cannonades and cannons, as well as musket fire, as ordered by Santa Anna to never stop giving them bombardment, trying to break the morale of the Texians. But on the morning of March 6th, today, Mexican forces broke through a breach in the outer wall created by a cannon at the courtyard and overwhelmed the defenders. Santa Anna ordered his men to take no prisoners, and they had risen their flag of no quarter. And only a small handful of Texans were spared, being only women and children. One of these was Susanna Dickinson, the wife of Captain Almaran Dickinson, who was killed during the initial fight, and her infant daughter Angelina was also spared. These family members of the defenders, and some of which who were just workers, were spared, but they were given a stiff warning. Santa Anna sent them to Houston's camp in Gonzales with this one warning, that a similar fate would await the rest of the Texans with no quarter if they continued their revolt. The Mexican forces had suffered heavy casualties at the Battle of the Alamo. The estimates are anywhere from 600 to 2,000 men were lost on the Mexican side. So remember, if they have an absolute maximum estimated force of 6,000 and they lost a maximum of 2,000, they lost a third of their force, overwhelming these 200 men holding onto the fort. A lot of Texans, as well as myself, kind of consider this as the Thermopylae of the Texas Revolution, because their disparate bid to hold on not only whittled down the numbers of the enemy force significantly, it also delayed them in time, which allowed for Sam Houston to be able to rather gather the rest of the Texan forces and make ready for Santa Anna. So, that brings us to the legacy of the Alamo. From March to May, Mexican forces once again occupied the Alamo. And for the Texans, the Battle of the Alamo became a symbol of heroic resistance, and it became a rallying cry in their struggle for independence. On April 21st, 1836, Sam Houston and 800 Texans overwhelmed and defeated Santa Anna's Mexican force of 1,500 men at San Jacinto, which is near the site of present-day Houston. Shouts could be heard as they overwhelmed the sleeping Mexican forces of "Remember the Alamo!" and "Remember Goliad!" as they overwhelmed them and took them either captive or slain. The victory ensued and ensured that the success of Texas independence was to be concrete. Santa Anna, who had been taken prisoner, wounded, as you can see here standing next to the wounded Sam Houston, had been taken prisoner, and he had to come to terms with Houston to end the war. In May, Mexican troops in San Antonio were ordered to withdraw and to demolish the Alamo's fortifications as they went. But today it is held with great regard. In 1845, the United States annexed Texas. For many years afterwards, the U.S. Army quartered troops and stored supplies at the Alamo. The Alamo remained a symbol of courage and resistance, and in the Mexican-American War of 1846, U.S. soldiers revived the Remember the Alamo battle cry whenever fighting against Mexican forces. The Alamo has been commemorated on everything from postage stamps, to films, to video games, and even on t-shirts. And there's many films, including the 1960 film The Alamo, starring John Wayne as Davy Crockett. In 1883, the state of Texas purchased the Alamo, later acquiring property rights to all the surrounding grounds, and it is now a museum of the Texas Independence War, and you can actually go visit that and see the inside of the chapel, which is still pristine. They have a couple of the cannons, a couple of the outer walls still intact. It's really quite an interesting sight to see, and it has quite a heavy spirit to it. The Daughters of the Republic of Texas, which is a women's organization including descendants of the earliest Texan residents, has managed the Alamo and its grounds since 1905. Today, more than 2.5 million people a year visit the Alamo. The 4.2-acre site includes some of the original structures, dating all the way back to the missionary period that I spoke about. So that brings us to the conclusion for today on our video on the Battle of the Alamo. So I hope you enjoyed, I hope you learned a bit about the spirit of Texas and why the Texans are so gung-ho about many things, and the Battle of the Alamo. So, today we talked about the stiff resistance of 200 men against a superior force in the name of liberty and resistance. If you have any comments, suggestions, concerns, or if I got something wrong, leave that in the comment section down below for me and I'll get back to you because I do read all your comments. If you enjoyed today's video, please hit that like and subscribe button for me so it lets me know what you are enjoying and it helps me get my videos out there. But that is enough from me for today, and as always, I am ShieldBro6 for the History Armada, and I will see you for your next weekly dose of history. Thanks for watching.